Sometimes it takes only a sliver of light in the darkest hour to reveal the truth we've ignored all along. For Sylvester Stallone, that light came from under the pantry door at 2:08 a.m. The Stallone estate in Calabasas stood still, almost sacred in its silence. Beyond the iron gates and curving palms, it was a haven of stone, cedar, and quiet. The home had grown quieter in recent years. Not empty, but settled. The kind of stillness that comes not from absence, but from a family that no longer needs to shout to be heard. His 3 daughters were grown now, but still lived close enough to fill the house with noise on weekends. His wife, Jennifer, was asleep upstairs, her soft breath familiar against the down pillows. Even the dogs had stopped pacing long ago. Sylvester, though, couldn't sleep. Some nights were like this. He padded barefoot down the stairs, the wood cool beneath his feet. A robe draped loosely around his shoulders, and the familiar creak of the 6th step reminded him this house, like himself, had its history. He made for the kitchen, not for food, but the comfort of motion. That's when he saw it. A thin line of gold spilling out beneath the pantry door. It didn't belong. The pantry had once been a storage room. Recently, his wife had converted it into a combination of utility nook and quiet study space, mostly for staff to rest between shifts, read, or take calls. Nothing elaborate. A small desk, a lamp, a chair. But no one should have been in there at this hour. His brows drew together, not from anger or suspicion, just that slow, thoughtful concern that age grants you when you stop assuming and start listening. He opened the door without a sound. Inside, under the muted yellow glow of the desk lamp, sat Amara Jackson, his youngest housekeeper, 19, maybe 20, hired after high school, referred by the church secretary over in Van Nuys. Quiet girl, good work ethic, always the first to arrive, last to leave. He hadn't spoken to her much beyond polite good mornings and thank yous. But now, she looked different. She didn't see him. She was hunched slightly over a beat-up laptop, a loose spiral notebook beside her, pages covered in color-coded scribbles. Her hoodie was too big, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and her eyes darted between a video tutorial and a page of handwritten notes labeled Python Beginner Syntax. She had a pencil behind her ear, a granola bar half eaten beside a glass of water, and a mug of what smelled like cheap gas station coffee. Next to her laptop sat a printed workbook, Intro to Web Development, Pasadena City College Extension Program. Stallone didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, watching the way she paused the video, typed, erased, rewrote, underlined something in green, focused, alone. He thought of his daughter Sophia, at that age, pulling all-nighters over her senior thesis with 3 tutors and a fridge full of snacks by her side. She had every tool imaginable, and still it had been hard. This girl, this Amara, had none of that. He cleared his throat softly. She startled, nearly knocking over her mug. Her eyes went wide, pupils catching the light. She stood so quickly, the chair scraped hard against the tile. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, voice shaking. "I didn't mean I'll leave right now. I was just—" "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're fine." She looked at him, uncertain. "I thought no one would be awake," she added, adjusting her sleeves. "I usually am," he said, stepping toward the fridge to pour a glass of water. "Old bones don't rest easy." She gave a nervous smile, already beginning to gather her things. He held up a hand. "No need. Keep going. I was just curious." He nodded toward the screen. "What are you working on?" She hesitated, then answered softly, Basic programming. I'm applying to a boot camp online. TechBridge. They offer scholarships for people from underrepresented backgrounds. He looked down at her notes, the highlighted lines, the sketched diagrams. You're teaching yourself? She nodded. I work during the day. I study at night. The house is quiet. I can think better. He glanced at the old laptop, the peeling sticker on the lid, the fraying cord plugged into the wall. Why tech? She bit her lip. My little brother, he wants to be a pilot. And my mom, she's on disability. Coding pays. If I can get certified, maybe get remote work, I can be there for them. There was no self-pity in her voice, just facts, tired facts. You want to be a developer? I want to build something that lasts, she said barely above a whisper. Even if no one knows I made it, he nodded once. Said nothing more, finished his water, walked upstairs. But he didn't sleep. The next morning, over coffee, he asked Jennifer, How long's that girl been with us? Amara. His wife looked up, thoughtful. Almost 2 years. Works hard. Sends most of her pay to Georgia. Why? He shook his head lightly. Just wondering. That evening, Stallone made some calls. He didn't want media, didn't want credit. What he wanted was quiet impact. He contacted an advisor at TechBridge, explained the situation in vague, respectful terms, established a fund, the Horizon Fellowship, anonymous, enough to cover a full boot camp scholarship, a laptop upgrade, and monthly support. He wired the amount through a legal trust under Jennifer's name. No one would trace it back to him. 4 nights later, he walked past the study again. The light was still on, the keyboard tapping, the pencil scratching. He paused, hand on the doorframe, and listened. The house, usually silent, now sounded like it was waiting. Amara received the email on a gray Tuesday afternoon, just after folding the last stack of laundry. It came without ceremony, just a subject line. Congratulations, TechBridge acceptance and fellowship award. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She reread the name, the confirmation, the generous stipend, the new equipment voucher. She sat down on the bench near the garden, blinking hard at the screen, the scent of lavender and lemon trees drifting through the warm Southern California air. A full ride. She hadn't even told anyone she'd submitted the application. Her fingers trembled. Her heart thudded, like it didn't know whether to leap or freeze. She read it again, then again, and then she cried. That evening, long after the dinner dishes were done, and the last light had dimmed in the hallway, Amara stood outside Mr. Stallone's study door. She had never been inside, never knocked. But the printed email shook in her hand, and something told her that silence no longer fit the moment. She knocked softly. After a pause, his voice came, low and curious. Come in. She entered like someone walking into a room she'd only ever seen in photographs. Books lined the walls, awards stacked modestly to one side, not proudly displayed, but not forgotten either. He sat behind the desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, and looked up with that familiar, unreadable gaze. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her voice soft. I got into TechBridge, full scholarship, new laptop, living stipend. It's everything. She swallowed hard, then looked at him with eyes that searched. Do you know anything about a fund called the Horizon Fellowship? He didn't blink. I've heard of it, he said calmly. Sounds like someone saw something in you. She studied him. It's anonymous. Some of the best things are, he replied, not moving from his seat. Her hands tightened around the paper. I don't know if I can take it. she said finally. "My mom's health's not great. My brother just started high school. I send most of my pay home. If I stop working, if I leave here, I don't know how they'll manage." She hesitated, then looked at the floor. "I want this more than anything, but I don't know if wanting it is enough." Sylvester stood slowly, walked to the window, hands in the pockets of his sweater. Outside, the hills glowed gold in the last shimmer of light. He spoke without turning around. "Do you think stepping into your future is selfish?" "Sometimes," she whispered. "It feels like I'm choosing me over them." "You've been choosing them your whole life," he said. "That's not selfish. That's survival. But surviving isn't living. Not really. Living means building something beyond the fear of losing it all." She sat still, breath caught in her chest. "I'm not asking you to abandon them," he continued. "But maybe it's time someone else helped to carry the weight." The room fell quiet, heavy with something unspoken but understood. She placed the paper on the desk between them and stood. "I've never heard anyone say that to me before." "That's the problem," he said again, almost to himself. That night she didn't sleep much. She packed slowly. Her textbooks, her spiral notebooks, the cracked charger, a photo of her mom in an Easter dress, and her brother's last drawing, a clumsy cartoon of a plane with "For Amara" scrawled in bubble letters. Before the sun had fully risen over the ridge, she slipped quietly out the side gate, past the olive trees and the tennis court, down the long driveway with her single duffel bag and a folder of dreams that no longer felt impossible. From the upstairs window, Stallone watched her go. He didn't wave. He didn't call her name. But he stayed there, hand resting on the windowsill, until her figure disappeared beyond the cypress trees. Her new apartment near Echo Park was the size of a generous walk-in closet. The walls were thin, and the water took 10 minutes to heat, but the desk beside the window faced the sunrise. The first morning she sat there with a chipped mug of coffee and her laptop humming beside her. She whispered, "This is mine." She began each day before dawn. Yoga from YouTube, oatmeal with cinnamon, then hours of lectures, coding challenges. Most were younger, some had degrees, some had mentors, some had parents who sent them groceries in the mail. Amara had none of that, but she had quiet. She had purpose. She sent money home every Friday. Not as much as before, but enough to help. On the third week of class, she received an email from her brother's teacher. He wrote a short essay about his hero. It was you. She printed it, pinned it above her desk. The boot camp wasn't easy. There were nights she wanted to give up, nights when the code wouldn't run, when the logic broke down and her screen blinked red with errors. But she pushed through. She watched free online videos. She read documentation until 3 a.m. She wrote out bug fixes by hand when her Wi-Fi went out. Every Sunday, she called home. And every Monday, she kept going. A month in, she mailed a letter to the Stallone house. She didn't know if she should, but she wrote it anyway, by hand, carefully. "Mr. Stallone, I hope you and your family are well. I'm writing this from my desk, facing a window that looks out over the 101 freeway. It's loud, but when I put on headphones, I can pretend it's the ocean. I've completed my first module, HTML and CSS. I built a basic web page for my brother. It's nothing fancy, but when he saw it, he said, 'It looks like a real site.' I cried. I didn't tell him that, but I cried. Thank you. I don't know what else to say except I won't waste this." Amara Stallone read the letter late that evening. He'd just returned from a fundraiser for a literacy program. His youngest daughter had texted him a photo of a silly drawing. It had been a good day, and still her letter quieted him in a way few things could. He read it again. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside the top drawer of his desk, just beneath an old photograph of his own mother taken before he was famous, when life was harder, but somehow sharper too. A few weeks later, a second letter arrived. This one was shorter. I passed my JavaScript exam. Barely, but I passed. The woman who runs the support forum told me I ask good questions. That mattered more than she probably knows. I'm starting to believe I can finish. I hope your garden is still blooming. I used to love the roses near the tennis court. Thank you. A dot. He smiled at that, quiet, warm. He pinned it to the corkboard above his desk. Beside it, a single petal from one of the white roses she'd mentioned, pressed gently between 2 pages of his old poetry book. He didn't tell anyone why. That summer, her program entered its final phase. Team projects, mentorship matching, portfolio reviews. Amara had now learned how to build apps, debug code, manage deadlines. She worked part-time evenings at a diner in Los Feliz to help cover bills. But still, she coded through the night, slept little, and gave everything she had. Her final project, a platform to help local families find free clinics and food pantries, earned praise from mentors. She was offered 2 internship interviews, one company in San Jose, another a nonprofit based in South LA. She chose the latter. She said it felt closer to home. She mailed one last letter before graduation. No return address. Just the initials on the back flap, a J. I got the offer. Full-time, starting salary, benefits. I'll be able to take care of Mom, put something aside for Malik. It's still hard, but now it's hard with purpose. They call me junior developer, but when I walk into meetings, I feel something I've never felt before. I belong. Thank you for seeing me when I thought I was invisible. You gave me the window. I found the door, and I promise someday I'll leave it open for someone else. Amara. Stallone didn't reply, but that night he lingered a little longer by the back garden, where the roses still bloomed despite the early frost. He plucked one carefully, laid it beside the newest letter, and whispered, "You did it, kid." Amara's new role at the nonprofit began quietly. No grand orientation, no welcome banner, just a key card, a worn desk in a shared office in South Los Angeles, and a project folder labeled Neighborhood Health Mapping. Her first paycheck came 2 weeks later, and she took a photo of it, not to share, but to keep proof that all those late nights, all those silent hours with cheap coffee and borrowed Wi-Fi had led somewhere real. Her mom cried when she heard the news. Malik, her little brother, asked if she could teach him how to make websites now. That night, Amara treated herself to something she hadn't had in months: warm pad thai from the corner place and a soft blanket from Target that didn't scratch her skin. It wasn't luxury, but it felt earned. Weeks turned into months. She quickly became the person other interns turned to with their questions. Not because she knew everything, but because she listened carefully, fully. Her code wasn't always perfect, but it was thoughtful, functional, and above all, built with the people they served in mind. She added new features to the Clinic Finder app: real-time updates, Spanish translations, a visual map for users without strong literacy skills. She joined meetings with city officials, shared screens with tired social workers, stayed late to help a single mom track down pediatric care. When someone asked her why she worked so hard, she shrugged. because I know what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. One day, her manager forwarded an internal memo. A new initiative was launching, backed by a national grant, to open a community tech hub in an underserved area. They needed someone to lead it. A junior developer with lived experience. Someone who could build not just software, but trust. Amara stared at the email for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She started writing an application, then deleted it. She wasn't ready. Then she remembered something Stallone had said months ago on that quiet night in the study. Surviving isn't living. She opened a blank document and began again. Her proposal was clear, practical, and full of heart. 5 rooms, free internet, public use laptops, night classes in coding and digital literacy, childcare during workshops, a staff made up of people from the neighborhood. She called it the Uplift Center. A week later, she was called into a meeting and offered the role of director. Not coordinator, not assistant, director. Her hands trembled as she signed the paperwork. That evening, she walked to the park near her apartment and sat beneath a jacaranda tree, the blossoms fluttering down around her like lavender rain. She whispered to the air, "You still with me, Mr. Stallone?" She didn't expect an answer, but she knew he was. She never forgot who helped open her first door, but she also knew she couldn't live in gratitude forever. So she turned it into action. She built the center from scratch, drafted the budget, secured the permits, interviewed contractors, and met with church leaders and school principals. She hired 3 local women, one a former student, one a retired school teacher, one a young mom learning graphic design. She trained them herself. The day before the soft opening, she sat alone in the main room, walls freshly painted, tables lined with laptops, and cried for the first time in months, not from sadness, but from the realization that she'd created something she never thought she'd be allowed to touch. The next morning, the doors opened. Quietly. No cameras, no press. Just people. A teenage boy looking for help with a resume. A grandmother trying to apply for Medicare. A woman with 2 kids asking if she could bring them to class. Amara greeted each one with the same steady voice she once used while folding towels or studying beside a broom closet. The space filled with life slowly, then all at once. She worked 12-hour days, sometimes more, balancing IT issues with lesson plans, mentorship programs with donor reports. Her shoes wore out again, and she replaced them with the same $40 pair she'd bought after TechBridge. She liked how they fit. One evening, long after everyone had left, she sat on the bench outside the center, beneath a mural painted by local kids, a tree with colorful fingerprints for leaves, and in the center, a quote in bold, "Build the thing you once needed." The sky was streaked with orange and pink. She closed her eyes, exhausted, content. Then footsteps approached, not rushed, not hesitant. She opened her eyes slowly. Sylvester Stallone stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, a quiet warmth in his gaze. He looked older, thinner, but somehow lighter, as if something inside him had unknotted. She didn't speak. Neither did he at first. Then he said, "I was nearby." She smiled. "I figured." He looked up at the mural. "They think this place is magical. They're not wrong." He turned to her, studied her face. "Is it what you imagined?" She exhaled slowly. "No," she said. "It's better." He sat beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. For a while, they watched the streetlights flicker on. The world moved around them, cars passing, music drifting from a restaurant down the block, but on that bench, time softened. "I didn't come inside," he said. "It's yours now." "It's ours," she said gently, "whether you admit it or not." He smiled, just slightly. Then, without drama or speeches, he reached over and took her hand. His was warm, rough around the edges. They sat like that, not speaking, not needing to. Just two people, shaped by choices, by quiet acts of belief, by the kind of grace that doesn't ask for applause. He didn't stay long. He stood, gave her hand one last squeeze, then began to walk. But before he turned the corner, he looked back. "Keep the light on," he said. She nodded. "I always do." Back at the Calabasas house, in his study, Stallone opened the drawer where he kept her letters. There were 8 now, carefully folded. He took them out one by one and read them again. Then, with careful hands, he framed the very first note, the one where she said, "I won't waste this," and hung it just above the old movie posters, right where the morning sun hit the wall. The room didn't feel like an office anymore. It felt like a garden of unseen victories. 3 years later, he passed away in his sleep. No headlines, no chaos, just peace. In his will, there was only one personal request beyond the usual formalities, that the Horizon Fellowship continue quietly, in perpetuity, directed toward students with stories like Amara's. At the funeral, there were few guests, close family, longtime friends, a few former co-stars. But one woman arrived late, white blouse, gray slacks, a stethoscope around her neck, though she wasn't a doctor. She stood at the back, didn't speak. When it was over, she approached the casket, knelt slightly, and whispered 2 words into the hush of the chapel. "Thank you." Then she turned and walked out, back into a world still in need of light. Amara never stopped writing. Even when the center expanded, even when she no longer needed to prove she belonged, she still wrote to herself, to the future, and in some quiet way, to him. She kept a journal where she recorded every milestone. The first student to get a job in tech, the mother who started her own side business, the high schooler who said, "I didn't think people like me could do this." She kept a photo of Stallone in her drawer, not from a movie, but the one they took outside the mural, where he looked a little tired but entirely proud. Years later, when she was invited to speak at a conference on digital equity, she opened her keynote with the story of a sliver of light under a pantry door. The room fell silent as she spoke, and when she finished, the applause wasn't loud, but it was deep. The kind that says, "I saw that door too." The kind that says, "I needed this." She always ended her talks the same way, just like her letters. "I haven't forgotten what brought me here, but I know where I'm going, and I keep the light on,